Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity, and today we're going to talk about something that's really scary, but something you need to address today. And generally, we have a tendency to just blow it off and think that it's like, I don't know, the message just isn't getting out about the chemicals that we're exposed to. And this particular study has to do with DDT. Now, we all know that DDT is bad for us, but we didn't know it at the time. It was heavily used, it was sprayed everywhere, and we were just, you see the pictures from the, 50s and 60s of kids playing in the DDT as they were fogging. Like, we just didn't know. And there are things that we're exposed to today that are much the same, specifically BPA in plastic water bottles that people, my gosh, they're just everywhere. And I could not be more against drinking water out of a plastic water bottle. But going back to the DDT study, keep in mind that they stopped, the EPA in 1972 stopped the use of DDT largely around the globe as well, except for control of mosquitoes in an area where malaria is rampant. But what's scary is that we know that DDT during pregnancy, or DDT would increase the risk of breast cancer. But what happens when somebody is exposed to DDT while they're pregnant, somebody being female? And that's where things get scary, because we know that their kids had an increased risk of breast cancer, increased risk of obesity, and the mammography, the breast density on mammography was larger. And so, we could argue that maybe it would make sense that those, especially women in the womb that were affected, could have an effect. But what about those kids? The women who were exposed, their grandkids. There's no way that the DDT could have an effect 2 generations later, unless you look at epigenetics and how chemicals change the way our genes are expressed. Sure enough, the grandchildren, granddaughters, I should say, they looked at them again at 26 years of age and found that these women had, when their grandmothers were exposed to DDT during pregnancy, these women had, the granddaughters had earlier onset of menses, menarche, and higher rates of obesity. That's scary 2 generations later, because how many chemicals are we exposed to day in, day out that people don't even think about? BPA is top of the list. Phthalates in our fragrances. Everybody has to have everything smell fantastic in the laundry. Teflon. I think more people are a little bit more aware of Teflon. Flame retardants. My gosh, we live in a chemical soup, and it seems like the vast majority of people aren't doing anything about it, and that's ridiculous. Stop drinking out of plastic water bottles. Don't buy them. Not only are they not good for the environment, the water in them may not be good for you, and certainly the BPA in the water is not good for you. Just stop. I don't know how many more times I have to say that, and yet I constantly see water bottles everywhere. Maybe if you're in the desert and dying of thirst and there's a vending cart with cold bottled water, that might be a good reason. But everyday use, it makes no sense at all to carry bottled water around. So how much will these chemicals, we know that in animal studies, BPA affects the offspring. No doubt about that. So could it affect 2 generations later through epigenetic changes? Absolutely. I don't think that there's a question. So the best thing you can do now is pay attention to these chemicals and avoid them as much as possible. As always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the comment section. I will also post a link to my toxicity blog article that goes over these exposures, especially BPA, and how we can avoid them, or at least reduce our exposure. And make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.